This is Around the Farm, and I'm your host, Clint Chaffer. And that's Chaffer like the back end of a combine, and we're going to be talking about all things ag. Today we have a very special episode in honor of Father's Day. I'm going to be talking to my dad, Doug Chaffer. And we're going to take a walk down memory lane, reminisce about farm technology throughout the years that's led to a lot of amazing technologies that we have today. Dad, welcome to the show, and how about you introduce yourself to the listeners?
Yep, my name is Doug Chaffer, and I come from a small rural community in central Illinois called Deer Creek. We farmed about 2.5 miles outside of town. Our farm was right along Route 150, and Mud Creek went through the farm. I lived there until graduating from college, and then moved up to another small rural community in western Illinois called Biggsville, where I was the ag teacher for 4 years before starting farming. I started farming in 1973 and am still attempting to farm today.
You know, I think with this year, attempting is a pretty good comment there.
Yes, I have can't decide whether I want to plant corn or beans or take my boat out in the field and fish.
Yeah, it's no laughing matter, but humor, I think, is a good way to cope at this point.
Yes, it's. I tell you what, if I didn't laugh about it, I'd probably be crying. So there's been a lot of planters, sprayers, etc. in the area that have needed a little assistance to get pulled out. So quite a few of us will not be upset probably as this year goes into the books, but we will do what it takes.
Well, I know you talk about farming this year, and if my math's correct, I think this is your 45th season that you're going to be putting in?
Yeah, I believe it is. I think on the very first field, maybe even I farmed it while I was teaching. I think I put my 46th crop on it this year. So getting right up there in age, and we won't mention the age.
Fair enough. Well, hey, over the years, Dad, I would imagine, you've seen a lot of change within technology in regards to farming. I mean, what was technology like when you put your first crop in, 46 seasons ago?
Well, when I put my first crop in, I had a planter with a drum on it, and it of course there was no such thing as a monitor, and so if you wanted to determine if you were planting, you needed to put a rag or something around the shaft or on the drum to see if it was turning, and if it was turning, you hoped that the planter was putting seed in the ground. The other thing we had on individual boxes was there was a rod that stood up on each box, and if you didn't see that rod working its way down as you were planting, that particular row probably was plugged up. There were no disc openers. It was what they called a runner planter, and in essence, the ground had to be worked extremely fine, and no-till was not even in the vocabulary, but that was our technology. Basically, a rag around the shaft and watching it turn.
Well, I would have to say that we have come a long ways since putting a rag on our planter. I mean, I think if I remember right, on our 84 800 Cyclo, I think you had a pretty decent monitor on that, didn't you?
Yes, I did. That was that particular planter. It came out with, or I ordered to come with it, a Dickie John a radar monitor, and back at that day, a radar system was pretty new, and once you calibrated the radar, it really was a big step. You actually could get some semblance of population direct readout, which before we basically had just a seed flow monitor told you whether or not it was working. But yes, the radar monitor to where we actually had a population sitting in front of us on the monitor was quite a step up, and there again, you needed to go back and calibrate your planter. You need to check it. But once you got that zeroed in, it was sure nice to see that number come up.
Well, I know you talk about those changes of planter monitors there, and I know we've even had quite the change of yield monitors. And what was kind of the first yield monitor that you ended up running on the farm?
On the farm, I had on a 1460 combine, I had a type of monitor that it was a flap in the end of the unloading auger, and it hung down, and it was hooked to a what I call a rheostat, and then a wire came back to the cab to a small box. And when you would unload, that flap would go out, and it would read you in bushels. Your secret was to always have the flow the same as the time before. So in other words, when the auger was getting close to being empty and you shut it off, you tried to shut it off with about the same flow each time. So exact, no, it was not. But there again, it did give us an idea of the bushels that we were picking at the time. And there again, we didn't know it as we were picking, but it gave us a number as we were unloading.
Yeah, and I know you've been collecting what I would call good yield data probably since 2000. Is that about right?
Yes, I started keeping what I consider relative accurate readings back in 2000. We had yield monitors at that time on the combine that if you took the time and did get them calibrated, they were the predecessor of today's monitors, or today's yield monitors, and they did actually give a pretty decent reading. But you had to calibrate them, and they threw the grain at the top of a clean grain against a pad, much like we do on most of them today. And so that was the start of it. And then to check it for sure, you would, at the end of the year, if you kept track of your bushels when you sold them, you could end up and you could come out pretty close most of the time. And it was there again. That's when things started stepping up. And then a few years later, after that, before we ever started making some kind of a map as we were going to where you could see it, what you were actually where you were covering. But that was years later even.
Well, I know you're not in your planter today. Still a little too wet out there. But you talked about the rag. You talked about your first monitor where you could get population. What's your what's the cab look like? Explain to the listeners what you got scattered throughout the cab now.
Okay, in the cab now I have a Pro 700 monitor that I use both for the planter control, most of the planter controls, I should explain, and my auto steer is controlled through that. I also have the Precision Planning 2020 monitor, which also controls different parts of the planter. I have the Clean Sweep controls, which are from Precision, and that's what controls my clean sweeps, raising up and down. And then I'll call it the Taste of Resistance, and that is the iPad with the FieldView cab app in there, and that literally is giving me a complete analysis as I'm going, and that's quite interesting. I mean, it's to sit there, and when you're on your auto steer, you have time to look through some of the features on this technology with the FieldView, and it is extremely interesting, and it's kind of fun to do. And then we get into the restaurant, and when I go up to Seaton, to my local round table, we'll call it, with the information on FieldView I have with me at all times, and it's quite interesting to watch the guys when you show them what kind of rain you had, just exactly what you're making for yield, what that field did, and we can go to the varieties, show them the varieties, and it creates quite an interest in to understand what you can get for information as you're going through the field, and it's amazing compared to what it had been when I started farming. It's just it'll amaze you. It's just that simple.
Well, it sounds like a long ways from the old pen and a pad that you used to carry around in your front pocket to keep track of all your hybrids on.
What is that you're talking about?
Exactly.
You got to realize you're talking to an aging farmer here, so those kind of things we try to forget, and we don't have any trouble forgetting them.
Well, just looking at technology in general, Dad, I've always looked at you as kind of a cutting edge individual, even outside of farming. I remember really having the first, probably one of the first computers around. I think you were running a 286 with Windows 3.1. I know we've had probably one of the first CD burners that we had back in the day. What's really driven you to be on that cutting edge and to continue to keep saying, hey, what is the next piece of technology that I can adopt not only in my life but also in my farming operation?
I guess to begin with, when computers very first came out, you're a little bit reluctant because back even when I was in college, I had a roommate, and he worked for a computer programmer, and that was basically the size of a 286 that took up a whole room, and you had punch cards. And at that time, you think, well, it's never going to be a compact home computer. But then as computers came out, and back then when the first one did come out, that 3.1, it was intriguing because Windows operating system, they handled a lot of the technology and the situations that you used to have to do with MS-DOS. And when you start seeing that even the moon landing was done with a computer that was no bigger than a 286, and then to realize where we're at today and what we can do with them today it's unbelievable. And they have gone up, like I say, from 3.1, and in the process it can be extremely frustrating, as everyone knows, when a computer crashes or when a computer, what we say, does what it wants to do on its own. But overall, for what they accomplish and what they do, I couldn't farm without them today. It just would not be possible. Not with the kind of technology. We've even gone here on the farm. We have our own RTK network that we broadcast off of our leg and off our grain leg, and it is sold out to distributed out to some other farmers in the area. And so there again, we are within 1/2 inch of any place on the farm, and that is quite interesting, and there again, I think back to where it was when I started, and it is hard to comprehend. It really is.
Well, I tell you what, Dad, you've been a true inspiration to me, and I'm glad you passed on that technology trait. So I want to take this moment to say thank you for that. Well,
I appreciate it, and you've done you run with it a lot further than what I can and have and can. The other thing, one wish that I do have, and that would be that if I could start 20 years ago where we're at today, because I believe we've just touched the tip of what we're going to be doing with technology and computer systems, and I would love to be in and continue on up from here on up, because I believe we've just touched the tip of the iceberg, and I really believe that.
I couldn't agree more. I think especially from a technology side, farming is just going to keep getting more and more exciting.
Yes, I definitely believe so, and maybe even there'll be a push button that I could push, and it would get rid of some of that water out in my fields.
Well, keep your fingers crossed. I don't think we have that one yet. So.
Oh, okay.
Well, Dad, I just want to say thank you very much for coming onto the podcast and having this conversation with you. Again, you've been an inspiration in my life, and it's just been a joy to have this conversation with you.
Well, I appreciate it, and I've enjoyed where you've gone with it, because you've taken it to heights that I didn't believe was possible. So I'm very impressed with that. So that's great.
Well, thank you. Well, happy Father's Day, and we'll go ahead and wrap it up. So appreciate it, and thanks again.
All right. That sounds good. We will talk to you later. Thank you very much.
Yep, thank you. Well, Around the Farm is brought to you by Climate FieldView. Don't miss any episodes. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts, or find episodes on climate.com. I want to hear from you, so send me in your thoughts, your questions. Go to Twitter and go to the FieldView Twitter handle, @FieldView. Use the hashtag FieldViewClint, so I can find your tweet, and I'd love to answer your questions in upcoming episodes. And speaking of feedback, we'd love it if you'd take a minute, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating, leave us a review, and as always, we'll see you around the farm.